So we're going to now get into the main section, the core of the Hakdamat Perek Chelek, Rambam's introduction to the Mishnah of Chelek. It's been a few weeks. I'm going to give a brief summary of what we've discussed so far. The beginning, it comes off the Mishnah of Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Chelek Olam Haba. All of Israel have a share in Olam Haba, and Rambam just wants to talk about now. Well, what is Olam Haba? How does Olam Haba relate to other forms of reward and punishment we find the Chachamim talking about, like Gan Eden, Gehenna, Tchias HaMesim, Yemos HaMashiach? How do all these different things relate to one another? And part of his discussion, he looks into how we interpret Agadot, because most, if not all, of where we find Chazal talking about Olam Haba and reward and punishment is Agada. And Agada has its own particular personality, its own particular way of approaching it and interpreting it. He talks about the absurdity of presuming that rewards for mitzvot and avoiding averot in this world is some kind of hedonistic afterlife, in the way as that some Islam and some other religions have. That we spend our life supposedly controlling ourselves, refining ourselves, developing a spiritual connection to God, and so we have this idea that the reward for that is just sort of some sort of hedonistic afterlife with all the pleasures you want, or the punishments being the opposite of that, or the physical punishments. He said this is an absurd way of looking at it. Part of the problem is, though, that because, as we're going to discuss now, spiritual pleasure is something which we don't easily tap into and appreciate if we're not on the right wavelength for it. Therefore, the only way that Chazal can represent to us the idea of great pleasure is through a metaphor of physical pleasure. Therefore, many of the things which are presented to us appear to be physical rewards, and people take that on. Well, that is what Judaism holds out to us. If we keep the mitzvot, if we connect to God, then we'll get really good foods, really great big houses, and an easy life. So the Rambam says that it's absurd to think that is really the set of rewards and punishments that Judaism holds out to us. He brings Chazals which talk about how that we shouldn't really be motivated by reward at all. The ultimate level we have is called Lishma Me'ava, where once we recognize the truth of the Torah, we want to serve God because it's emet. We want to do the emet because it's emet. We want to do the truth because it's right. We want to connect to God because of who He is. Yes, there is reward as well, but that isn't our motivation. And we have the idea of mitoch balishma, that in order to, so it's like a catch-22, that in order to get to a situation where we appreciate how great the Torah is and to get a spiritual connection to God, we first have to get on the cycle of tefillah and Torah and doing things even for the wrong reason. There we get to appreciate the greatness of it. We start keeping Shabbos even for the wrong reasons, and then we get to appreciate how great it is, and we want to do it for its own sake. So these are all some of the ideas we've gone to up until now. And now we're going to go into the section which begins about Ta'achel L'daber b'mashekevanti la. Now we're going to start, having had all of this background and this introduction, we're now going to start getting to the main part of the Hakdamat Perek Chelek, where Rambam's going to say why it is that Chazal can't tell us straight out what Olam Haba is, and why we should appreciate it. Okay? So Haviyadeh, we should know Ki Kamashla Yasig Hasuma Einatzvaim. I think we started a little bit of this last time, so we're going to return to the beginning of the section. Just like a blind person cannot appreciate the full spectrum of colors, and you can't explain to a deaf person different sorts of tones and music. You can't explain to a eunuch the sexual pleasures. So too, physical bodies, certainly unsophisticated, undeveloped, unrefined physical bodies, cannot appreciate, cannot tap into, cannot even understand the existence of spiritual pleasures. If you try explaining to a deaf person the beauty of a piece of music, you've just got no words you can use to even convey it to him. It's just impossible. You can't even begin to describe it. The same way if you're trying to explain a beautiful sunset, a beautiful painting to a blind person, it's not just he doesn't quite get there. He's got doesn't have the tools for even to be able to appreciate what it is he's missing. And that kind of concept is a regular human being who's not yet developed a physical antenna, a framework for connecting to spirituality. It's just impossible to even start to explain to him what spiritual pleasure is, what Olam Haba is. And that is why Chazal just cannot tell us. Commercial Dagim, he gives into other examples here, which are some of them are based on ancient science. Dagim enim yodim yisod ha'esh, לפי שחיוסם ביסוד שהפקה, אין נודע בזה העולם הגופני, תענוג עולם רוחני. אבל אין אצלנו בשום פנים תענוג זולוסי, תענוג הגוף בלבד. We only really appreciate fully physical pleasures. We can understand physical food and drink and sexual pleasures. Any pleasure that which we can't sense physically, we tend to reject. It's a fantasy. It's not real. We tend to think of physical beings, tend to think of physical things, and physical pleasures as real, and anything else is made up and not real. So we can't perceive it. The important was in the beginning of thinking. If you take an undeveloped, regular physical person and you start trying to explain to them these things, they just don't get it. It's impossible. Start a person, of course, who's spent years tefillah, Torah, connecting to Hashem. They can begin again. They can't fully appreciate what Olam Haba is, but they're at least on the they begin to have some kind of framework to discuss these ideas. So only someone who's ready to go into great investigations. And this is fitting that it's so. We are based in the physical world. That's where we've been placed. And it's a great effort for us to be able to overcome our physical being, to be able to break through that, to get, as the Rambam calls it, flashes of insight and inspiration. I mean, the Rambam talks the difference between the Adam and Chava and Gan Eden. They had this the light that was there from the 7 days of creation. There was great light, which was a great spiritual intellectual understanding. After the Chelek of Adam Rishon, it became dark, and only great people can develop themselves to get flashes of insight, which will light up the way at certain points. Insight and intuition, which suddenly you get some sort of breakthrough. Wow, you understand something. We only get the Tanug Hagurim, Tanugim Hanafshim, spiritual pleasures. Really, hang to midiim. These are the permanent, real pleasures. Omdim la'avenim nifsakim. The Olam Haba pleasures, the real pleasures, which we find it hard to even tap into, these are the permanent, real pleasures. We look at the Rambam, the very last Mishnah in Shas. It's a drasha about how there are 310 worlds for tzaddikim. And why 310? Because I think there's a pasuk that comes up, Olam Haba Yesh. And so Yesh means existence, there is. And it's a gematria of 310. So the Rambam says that the real existence is Yesh, and that's Olam Haba. That is a real permanent existence. But it's not something which we can even tap into and appreciate at first investigation. ולא יצא להקים מן הפילוסופים שאינם המערכים הכרוכים לגלים אלא הם תענוג, אבל באמת שיש להם תענוג גדול מאוד מה שהם יודעים משיגים באמת הסבור יסברך. אבל זה הם בתענוג תמידי שאינו נפסד. So the real permanent pleasure is an intellectual, spiritual connection to Hashem, be able to appreciate and understand things. ואין תענוג גופני אצלם ואינם משיגים also. And the Malachim, the spiritual entities, the Rambam talks about in the Hilchos Sadatar how they appreciate and they can perceive God on a very high level. They are not able to understand and tap into what physical pleasures are. They are so far removed from the physical world, they're almost the opposite. They cannot perceive and they've got no connection to what physical pleasure is. They don't have physical senses, therefore to them they don't understand what it is that we're chasing after. This is the madness. For us, once we become purified, I presume this means once we've gone to Olam Haba, or I guess a great tzaddik who has fully purified himself to the extent that he's broken through the barriers of physicality. Right, as in he sees the people and it's just, what are they doing? Rabbi Shmuel time he comes out of the cave. It's the same thing. He's come out and it's impossible for him. He just cannot. He's so purified himself that it says it's such a craziness what these guys are doing. He has to go and sort of like depurify himself so that he can at least relate to the other people. So someone who's been mizdakeh, who's purified, no matter Mishi is Dakeh, someone's gone up to that kind of level, Achamosai, right? Typically be after the to really to him the truth and the purity of God is absolutely real. Ain't a masik atonim gefonim. Ain't a right about him. He's got no perception of physical pleasures, and he's got no will for it. And he gives a mashal now, a metaphor, a parable for this. Ke'ein sheyirtza hamelech. So it gives a mashal for someone who's a great king. He spends his whole day about thinking how to run the nation and great projects and wars and all the big things he's thinking of. So this king, this great wise king, so when he was a little kid, he ran around in the streets playing ball with all the other kids. And that, for him at the time, was a great pleasure. Once he's now developed into his great emperor, great king, he's got no will to go back and play ball on the street with the kids. He can't even imagine what the pleasure is anymore. So too, we're in this physical world. We're like the kid playing ball, chasing after a ball. But once we've reached a stage, whether it's in this world or usually in the next world, where we can appreciate what true spiritual pleasure is, we can't even imagine wanting to go back and play ball with the kids in the street anymore. That's the metaphor we bring. So this king, when he was a little kid in the street, he couldn't. At that time, it would have been boring to sit there in the political office. Working out how to run a kingdom. Now he's reached that stage and he's developed and he's refined himself. That is where he wants to be. He doesn't want to go back. He's got no wish and no will. He can't even connect to the pleasure of playing ball in the streets anymore. So that's a little bit of a mashal to the different states of the unrefined human and the spiritually refined human being. Now, when we think we're going to drive a little bit further between these two different sorts of pleasures, physical pleasure and how we in the physical world find it hard even to grasp the nature of spiritual pleasure. Tim said, so he's going to try and show how even in this world we can get an idea there's something beyond pure physical pleasure. Most people in this world, so people will chase in this world something called kavod, honor, which is not entirely a physical thing. It's something which is a little bit beyond the physical, and that is something we can understand because people's younger years, they're more likely to chase. I don't know which of the Muslim books talks about how people in the younger years will chase after the cruder physical pleasures, and as people get older, they start chasing kavod more. There's like a bit of a switch over. As people become older and more mature, their mind opens up, and something which is more than a basic physical pleasure now becomes sought after. So they want people to reckon them and to honor them. Whereas let's say the teenager will look after specifically physical pleasures. Someone who's a little bit older, an adult, 40, 50 years old, 60 years old, they want to look people to look around and give them honor and shul. And that is a less physical pleasure than Machal Mishta. Kamokain, similarly, many people in this world choose to have a big pleasure of getting revenge. Getting revenge from someone is this really great feeling when you pay them back, right? So very often, people will be prepared to forego basic physical pleasures. They'll starve themselves. They'll go to put themselves to great difficulty in order to get that piece of revenge. Go on, right? They'll pay good money, and they'll be willing to put themselves out and forego things for. And what is revenge? It's not a physical pleasure. I think in Mesilat Yesharim, I think it's Mesilat Yesharim that says it, that it's a kind of pleasure which is ein olam haba, or it's something we can get an understanding of a pleasure which is non-physical. Again, it's not olam haba because we're not getting revenge on anyone, but it's the idea that there's something there which we really get so much pleasure from. Imagine think of the pleasure you get when you really pay someone back, and it's not a physical pleasure. So the idea that there are things beyond pure physicality is what he's trying to show us there.
That was like a dish best served cold, no? So.
Right, I've seen that. I've seen that quite a couple of times.
No, people always say like revenge was like a dish best served cold. I don't know why, but
Meaning it's worth waiting for. You don't. The Iranians. Presuming it's a sexual pleasure, people will be prepared, even if they have the opportunity. Many people will hold back. Not because necessarily they think they're scared of God, but because they're scared of being embarrassed in front of people. So shame and embarrassment, again, it's not something which is a pure physical punishment, but it's something which people feel very strongly. And he's saying the fact that it's a non-physical punishment, non-physical affliction, that is why it is people feel it more strongly. Just like revenge and honor are things which are non-physical and are a little bit higher. So he's trying to show that on the scale of pure pleasure and pure punishment, things which are non-physical, we actually tend to rank higher, certainly as we get older. Again, teenagers don't have the fully developed mind, so therefore they tend to go straight for the. There you go.
And does he try to say that, or at least like seem to imply that that things which are more like intellectual, like more in our mind, rather than our feelings, rather than like physical things, are closer to spiritual realm, so to speak?
I think so, because I think he's trying to. I mean, he starts off saying that we're purely physical beings, and definitely we can't tap into what Olam Haba already is. But then he's trying to show that we can, nevertheless, we can appreciate the fact, even within our physical world, there's a scale of pleasures and afflictions, and non-physical ones for people who are more mature. You see from the way people act that they tend to rank spiritual, non-physical pleasures and non-physical afflictions more severely and higher than physical ones.
I mean, I would say it's still physical, I think, because in the end, like it's something that goes on in your brain. Like
it's less physical. He's not the same as Olam. He's not saying it's the same as Olam Haba, but he's saying you can see from the fact that
it's not tangible. Maybe that's
right. It's not the same as eating a really good steak. Right. That's a purely physical pleasure.
Like for instance, like if I have to say, like I said, my phone connection right now, like I cannot touch them, see it, I don't know, whatever, but it's physical, like it is something, like if something is being said, you're not able to perceive it, like we don't see it, like we don't, but it's there, it's not spiritual, like it's physical. Mm-hmm. It's just like less tangible though, like it's more like in a way.
But I mean, yeah, I'm not sure the Rambam goes into it. I think Mesilat Yesharim so even brings some of these ideas into Olam Haba. He talks about how the shame that people feel in Olam Haba of seeing what they could have been and having other people being higher than them. That's a little bit what the Rambam's talking about in terms of shame and covered. So I don't think the Rambam brings that into his Olam Haba, but the Ramchal certainly does. So. Like the feeling you've earned something, or the feeling that you haven't deserved something. Right, because that's another thing that Ramchal talks about. They bring in. Ramchal asked the question, well, why couldn't God have just given us Olam Haba without us having to work? God could do anything, so why couldn't God just given us Olam Haba automatically? Why does He have to put us through this whole? So the answer he gives is inherently built in that what's the phrase he uses? The bread of shame is none
That's right.
The bread of shame, it's something which is an inherent truth. It's not something which God could just make up. And therefore, that's bringing the idea of shame and honor again into Olam Haba, and saying that we couldn't just that's having something which we don't deserve, even on Olam Haba, it's an element of shame, which it's because it's a non-physical pleasure, a non-physical
I mean,
affliction.
I
I'm
thought
not sure the Rambam brings it in so much. He brings it in as a moshul for the sort of.
I thought that the way how at least how I understood the Ramchal, but it's been a little while since I studied that part. But I think the way how I understood it, that he actually tries to say that since Hashem is the ultimate good, basically in the world, and good only produces good. So therefore, he said like he must produce something that's also ultimately good, and therefore the reward cannot be something. Let's say the ultimate good is a reward that you feel that you earned, and not something that you get for free. So therefore, he said that since not if you get it for free, it's not perfect, like in a
Gives
sense.
a sense of shame.
I mean, I would say because there's still a better version.
The phrase he uses is "naman sufa," which I think it
Uh-huh.
means bread of shame, meaning that you'd feel shame in Olam Haba for having something you don't. So he brings even as I think the Ramchal brings this more literally in both Mesilas Yesharim and Derech Hashem into Olam Haba, saying that even these sorts of feelings you actually have. So the Rambam doesn't go quite that far. He just
Right.
brings it as a marshal for the sort of great spiritual feelings and pleasures and things that
Well,
you
that's the
have.
thing. I feel like the Ramchal, at least how I understood it, is not necessarily that he says that you will feel the shame in Olam Haba. It's more, I think, that he says that since a person, let's say, now, like in this world, like you would feel shame if you would get something that you didn't earn, or therefore it cannot be the highest level, and therefore what you get in Olam Haba must be something that you earn.
I could have to check
But not
that out.
necessarily that you. I mean,
Certainly, Mesilas Yesharim he says this, but Derech Hashem, it could be. I have to check that out.
I mean, it's not in that world, like it's, but yeah.
Okay, I'll check it. We'll try and check it up the next
I
week.
mean, the point in the end is that I think that why we have to work for it. I think that's what he tries
Right,
to
because
prove.
if God is, it's always those circular questions. Like if God is the ultimate good and can do anything, then let Him just give
Right.
everyone a free pass without having to work for it. Fine. So what the Rambam's trying to basically showing here is that even within our own physical world, even when we don't have these receptors that can pick up spiritual pleasures, we can still see that people who are more refined, more mature, rank less physical pleasures higher than purely physical ones. And if this is so within our physical existence, how much more so in a purely spiritual world, when within Olam Haba, we'll just be there with our neshama, not with our guf. It's the Rambam's shitta. Sham midias habari isbara. We just be there, just be our soul with the knowledge of God. He compares it to the level of malachim. It's indivisible, it's indescribable. The actual pleasure that there is no moshel which can adequately convey it. Which is again, he's going into why it's not really written about. All we have is mashalim about reward and punishment, no actual agada which can portray it. This is from Tehillim. Is the David HaMelech is not just is one second. These two separate quotes. David HaMelech, right? So when he's describing Olam Haba, he doesn't describe what it is. He just says Rav Tuvacha, the great good, because we can't actually use words to describe it. He can just say it's this. Olam Haba ain't boy. Lo achila v'lo shtia, lo rechitza v'lo sicha v'lo tashmish. This is one of the main Mamari Chazal that Rambam bases his understanding of Olam Haba on, that it's a non-physical existence. There's no physical existence at all. No eating, no drinking, no washing, no sexual activity. Ela tzadikim yoshvim b'atrasem rosheim. It's the righteous sitting there, and they have crowns on their heads. V'ne'enim miziv hashchina, and they are benefiting from the glow, literally, of the Shekinah. Right? No. He's gonna unpack it now.
It's interesting because this, how I always learned what the Shekhinah means. It's like God's sort of like presence in this world, which would be physical. Like,
He wouldn't say that's physical. I think for the Rambam understands Shekinah as being intense hashgacha. It's it could be within the Rambam here. So we're gonna
okay, of course, yeah.
so we're gonna go with that.
He understands Shekhinah as meaning having, let's say, this very
intense
intense
hashgacha.
like
For example, the Beis Hamikdash was the place of the strongest hashgacha, and
meaning that Hashem directly
so Shlomo Melech. So when
like,
Shlomo Melech dedicates the Mikdash, he starts off by saying, "Shemaim Shmeh Shemaim Lo Yichalchalu." The heavens, even the heavens of the heavens can't contain you. So of course this building can't contain you. But obviously you're not actually dwelling here. What is it for? Well, please could this be a place where everyone's tefillahs will be answered, and people will come from all over the world, Jews, non-Jews, and you will listen and respond to all the prayers. Meaning it's a place where there'll be very, very intense Shekhinah, and people could tap at Ruach HaKodesh and all these sorts of things. That is the Shekhinah for the Rambam.
like basically where the reception is the strongest.
Yeah, I think I call it in my Judaism Reclaimed book, Hashgacha hotspots.
Right.
To the time that people.
Like some people say, like, how is it possible? Like I saw someone like explaining this like this way, like how is it possible that Hashem can be everywhere? But then, like in some places, we said in the Kotel or our Beit, actually, in the Beit HaMikdash, there your prayers are answered better, or there like more like.
So that's my Pashas True, Judaism Reclaimed. It's I think the Maral talks about it. He says that really we know that all these things we can't talk about God, and God is equally in all places or no places at the same time. Yet, someone who says that there's no holy places is denying like a basic ikarim of Judaism.
Right.
So I think the way he says it is that it's from our perspective. God allows us in certain places, or certain times maybe also, to tap into spirituality. Again, it's like hot. We get a certain hotspot.
Right.
We can go along and we can tap into it. You can have the same phone and walk around different places, and you have a weak connection.
Right.
Suddenly, you get to a place with a hotspot. It's not because God's more there, but He's allowed us to tap into Him.
Yeah, that's like the Mashal, like if you have like there's radio waves everywhere in the world. It's not that if you're here, there's no radio waves, and here there is. Like they're going everywhere. But if you have a radio, you can pick up on them. So the place where the radio is, that's where you can actually like connect to these sort of like waves. But if you're in another place, like it's not so.
Joshua Hashem b'motzah, where he's found. Where is he found? Because I'll say, when is he found? During the Seres Teshuvah. Saying he's not there more than other times. Those are the days he set aside that he's particularly open to hearing our Teshuvah and everything like that. So
it enables us.
It's from our perspective. So I think basically everyone agrees there's a question of how the different frameworks from Rambam and the Kabbalah, and I think you got the Maharal says pretty much the same thing. And
that's also how he presents the concept of Shekhinah in it.
So I think the Mukabbalim have a different concept of Shekhinah altogether, and I don't know enough about it to present it. But the Rambam, it's only Hashgacha. I think the Mukabbalim they're more prepared about it. Just leave it at that. So when you say Nenim is in Hashchina, so what is it? Ritzon Eloma, but Omroi Atrasem Broshem, their crowns on their heads. The crowns refers to Hisharus HaNefesh. Bekiyum Hamuska. That refers to the part of the soul which remains in Olam Haba, which is the consciousness with the intellect and everything. That is the crown. That is the crown of a human. And that is the thing which is able to tap into the divine intellect, we describe it. For who Habari Sparach, the Yoshu Tzoniloma Muska Behi Dava Echad. this is referring to something that goes into more in Moreh Nevuchim. I'm going to it now. That the perceived and the thing which is perceiving becomes one. Our seichel can on some level tap into the higher intellect, to a connection to God. It's actually interesting that the same use of the mashal of crowns at Har Sinai, where we got the high level of nevuah which everyone was able to reach, is the mashal that's given as we all studied that we had special crowns at Har Sinai. And when we sinned with the golden calf, those crowns were taken away. So there's also some kind of some sort of mashal there. That we were going to have a very direct connection to Hashem from Har Sinai, and then instead of that, we got there was a more of a distance there, because again, the closer the connection you have, the more severe the repercussions if you go wrong.
Doesn't say also like in the Amidah for Shabbat morning, like it says about only specifically about Moshe Rabbeinu, because I think he
remained on that high level, which is why he was still shining. He still had that.
So Gishmach Moshe Klil this Erev Borosho, like it's Klil like also I think like sort of like a crown, like a Borosho and that.
So again, when everyone else lost their crowns, Moshe wasn't able to stay with them. He had to go outside the camp because he still had that great light and crown and everything. Whereas he had to put a veil over his face to even talk to them, because he was on now.
I think it's like a I think inherited all the crowns from the where it was supposed to be from the show, like he's
from the lucha. So I've heard that it's a different.
He got them all, like it's like this is. It was like he's not like so happy.
Wow. Okay. Fine. So this is everyone's sitting around, and their intellect, so to speak, their refined personality and character and intellect and everything is there. And their name is Ashkina. Their mind is connecting to Hashem, Shkina, exactly how we're going to phrase it. And that is a purely intellectual, spiritual pleasure, which we can't even tap into. We can't even understand it. There's something else I heard. It was actually it's a bit of a side point, but it's a very nice idea. Where we talk about how they are. 1 second. Leave it. Fine. Their pleasure is a purely spiritual, intellectual pleasure. What they're able to perceive from God. In the same way as the Malachim have. Again, we can't understand even the thought processes and the pleasures of the Malachim, and the neshamas of tzaddikim enter into that realm of Malachim, so to speak. Then we don't even, as the Rambam sets out in, I think it's Hilchos Torah, the different levels of Malachim, and he said that there are different rankings based on how much of the idea of Hashem they have, and that's basically whether the neshamas of tzaddikim, they're kind of in that realm. They have different levels of understanding of Hashem, and it's just what that pleasure is and what that knowledge is just beyond anything we can really pick up on. And it's permanent and it's absolute. This is the greatest good we can ever aspire to, and no other good can ever be compared to it. No other pleasure can be even compared to it. How can permanent, ultimate pleasure ever be compared in a moshel? Any moshel we give to it is some physical moshel in this world. How can any moshel ever be sufficient and never be enough? The same with the Rambam talks about Moreh Nevuchim, how any description of Hashem, any word we use to describe Hashem, is automatically got to be an insufficient moshel. And even the Mishnah we use, like Gadol, Gibor, Manor, those are fine. That we use certain words which Chazal allow us to use in Tefillah, but automatically it's not going to be enough. And he says the ultimate way of connecting to God is through silent meditation, because our minds, when we meditate, once it's true things to meditate on, we can meditate beyond the restrictions of words. Words or any human language is restricted by physicality because words pertain to things in the physical world, whereas our minds, when we meditate, can meditate beyond the borders of words.
I mean, but our mind's also constricted to our own imagination in the end.
But we can go beyond words. Words are much more restricted, whereas we can develop our minds to push a bit beyond that.
No, yes, true, but I was saying like it's like for instance, you cannot imagine what a color looks like that we don't know because we don't know. Actually, you cannot even
No,
imagine
but
like what it might look like.
for example, Beethoven was able to imagine music which he never heard. He was deaf, and his mind was able to. Your minds can meditate and think very strongly, which is why we talk about people get Ruach HaKodesh, that sort of thing. They've developed their minds, they've purified themselves to a level where their minds is again, it's not the same as Lo Yirani Adam Achai. No one can know there are things which after people are dead they can pick up on which we can't in this world, but to an extent meditating on true ideas and on true divine ideas and spiritual ideas can push you to a place where saying things over can't, which is why there are the Dumiyat Tehillah, there are the phrases that Rambam brings from Tehillim. The ultimate praise for God is in silence.
So that makes sense.
And this is why he also talks about when he's doing Agadatos, any Navi or anyone who has Ruach HaKodesh who tries to put some of that down into writing necessarily is doing something as a moshel, which most people won't be able to understand what he's saying. Because if he's really had some sort of insight into the upper worlds, he has had an insight into something which is the world which is beyond words, as the Rambam puts it. And therefore, automatically, any Agadata which is dealing with Ma'aser Merkava or anything which is like that is automatically going to be some sort of coded way of Rashi Parokim. It's going to be insufficient. So too, when we talk about Olam Haba, any moshel which we would use to describe it is automatically insufficient.
It's like in the Chassidut, they have this idea. They say that a nigun, a wordless nigun, just like a melody, like you say in some ways, like is higher or more like holy than a nigun which is set to words. Because the words limit is
That's why Chabad, they don't do Shabbos Zemiris with words. They do some cousins who they don't do Zemiris with words, only with a similar idea. So the Rambam would say that, but he'd have the prior sort of warning that before you get to the stage where you're doing it without words, first you have to have removed all the incorrect ideas and stuff. I mean, you must make sure that you've trained your imagination not to go wrong. Because if you're trying to meditate and you haven't first purged your mind of all the incorrect ideas, you're going to end up, your imagination is going to switch to take you towards thinking about it physical ways and the word this is Acher had when he went into the paradise. Yeah, it's probably a good place to leave it here. We'll carry on next week, hopefully.